Welcome, everyone, to the Ladies Who Launch Resilient Leadership Virtual Summit. My name is Friar. I'm a co-founder of Ladies Who Launch and the CEO of Nextdoor. So whether you're joining us from San Francisco, Toronto, Belfast, my home, Sydney, so many towns and cities all over the world, we're really thrilled that you're spending time with us. For those of you who are new to the Ladies Who Launch community, we're a nonprofit organization that supports women and non-binary small business owners and entrepreneurs around the globe to scale and sustain your amazing businesses. Today is the second portion of our fall hybrid summit. On Wednesday, we had the opportunity to come together with folks in the San Francisco Bay Area for the first time since COVID. It was so great to be together in person, finally, and we're hoping to do a lot more of that as we go into 2023. We're excited to be with you here today to talk about building communities that you can rely on, including financial institutions and other organizations to support you accessing capital when and where and how you need it. Today, only about 25% of women business owners seek financing. And yet we know working capital is critical to both scaling and sustaining your business. So to kick off our morning, our evening, our afternoon, wherever you are in your day together, I'm delighted to introduce our keynote speakers to talk about a partnership designed by, for women, and the non-binary business community. So please join me in welcoming Pam Hendry, Vice President and Treasurer of United Airlines, and Melissa Widen, Co-founder, General Counsel, and Chief Administrative Officer of First Women's Bank. Isn't that just even a great name? First Women's Bank. These institutions have recently come together to reimagine banking to meet the unique needs and challenges of our community. And I'm so thrilled to be kicking off our virtual summit hearing from them. So let me do a quick second of introductions. First of all, to Pam. Pam has an extensive background in strategically and cost-effectively financing aircraft. So think big, ladies. She has also raised capital for many multinational corporations, so she definitely knows how to find the money. Pam grew up in Southern California. She received her bachelor's degree in business economics from UC Santa Barbara. Welcome, Pam. And then Melissa. Melissa is an attorney and an entrepreneur and an executive with more than 25 years of business and legal experience. In addition to her work at First Women's, Melissa is the board chair of Personal PAC, a leading Illinois PAC focused on supporting women, and is a volunteer attorney with the ACLU's Judicial Bypass Coordination Project, among other causes. She's a graduate of Duke University and in the University of Maryland School of Law. So let's get started, ladies. Thank you for being with us. Pam, Ladies Who Launch and First Women's Bank both have the privilege of partnering with United Airlines in support of the communities we serve. At LWL, United Airlines supports our small business grant program called the Launch Program, which is for women and non-binary entrepreneurs across the country. First Women's Bank is being built by women for women. So tell us a little bit about why United is investing in organizations like this.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here today. For us, when you think about the way that we're set up in the United States, we have 7 hubs. So hubs can mean so much more than just an airport where people go from place to place. We also have so many stations. All of them are in the community. And so when we were introduced to First Women's Bank, we really thought about the idea that we are trying to touch all of the communities in which we operate. And so we also think about ways where we are doing business in addition to making charitable contributions. To be able to do business with some organizations like First Women's Bank, where they can then take that money and distribute it and have a much better feet on the ground opportunity to distribute funds, is really exciting for us. And deposits are like the basis for growing businesses since time began. I wasn't around then, but I do know that's what it was. And from that standpoint, the taking our money and allowing it to really multiply in this way is something that is key to us and really exciting for us to partner with First Women's Bank. So that sort of is how we think about the opportunity. We don't know every single organization or every single business that wants to grow that's out there. But folks like Melissa's organization, her company, First Women's Bank, they do. They're the ones that have the touch points. So we're so excited to be able to do business with them. And that's what it is. It's doing business. It's not a handout. It's business.
It's really, I love that, because I think your point about it's not just philanthropy or giving money. To be sustainable over the long run, it really has to be about getting into the community. We were talking a little before we kicked off here about also how United is supporting one of our amazing grantees, so Nana Joe's Granola, which is a wonderful small business, if you don't know them, by putting her granola into the SFO airport lounge. So I just think these, from the littlest things to the biggest things, really are what makes it sustainable and really does the purpose and the mission that we're all trying to get to, which is how do we help women be significantly more successful than what we've seen to date. Melissa, for you, thank you, first of all, for founding First Women's Bank. Thank you for being part of that founding team. It's incredible, innovative work, great business, but I love the focus on women. So talk to us about why you chose to do that. Let's speak to the specific opportunities that you see that the women's economy represents.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here today, Sarah, and great to see you, Pam. When we first started talking about forming First Women's Bank, we were just overwhelmed by the data around the women's economy. The data shows that women are leading an economic revolution in this country. And that is really why we decided to form First Women's Bank. So let me just go over the data very briefly for you. The number of women-owned businesses has skyrocketed in the past 20 years, up over 114%. So if you look at sort of the universe of businesses in this country, there are over 30 million businesses. 42% of them, are over 13 million, are owned by women. And a full 50% of those businesses are owned by women of color. And it's really the growth, the exponential growth in businesses owned by women of color that has powered the growth of the overall women's economy. If you look back to 2019, businesses started by women of color account for 89% of all new business starts every day. So we have this incredibly rich, powerful, growing women's economy, but they share a need, and that's access to capital. And the data around sort of the gender gap in access to capital, the gender lending gap, is incredibly stark. So if you look at the entire women's economy, those businesses are only accessing an estimated 16% of all commercial loans. And that's just the volume of loans. If you look at the total dollars lent, it's down to 4.4%. So that is exactly why we formed this bank. We need a bank that is focused on supporting the women's economy and closing the gender lending gap. Yeah,
I'm both sad by the stats, but heartened by what you're trying to do. And that is an increasing stat. That's only 16% of loans to women. Come on, ladies, non-binary folks out there, we are 50% plus of the population. So Melissa, what are the gaps? Like, why do you think that difference exists? And then maybe segue into some of the products that you're bringing from First Women's Bank. Like, part of having you here today is to get that word out, because I think everyone listening could benefit.
So, every business owner is unique. Every business is unique, and the women's economy is not a monolith. But there are and research has identified several factors that have contributed to this gender gap in access to capital when it comes to commercial financing. First, we know that women really aren't connecting with the right forms of commercial capital. We see that women tend to over-rely on personal credit tools when they launch their bank, and then sometimes throughout the life of their businesses. And that can be very limiting, and it actually can have a real impact on their ability to get commercial financing down the road. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we see that women are managing very successful firms, but when they need growth capital, they sell equity in their businesses instead of considering debt to fund that growth. And sometimes that's absolutely appropriate given the industry, given the sort of evolution of a business, but often it's not. And we see that women aren't really spending enough time really learning about and exploring other options. They may not realize that a competitively priced commercial loan could be, and often is, a far less expensive way of financing their growth. So we're really messaging that and encouraging women to explore commercial debt instruments more. And there's really data around this problem. In addition to the gender lending gap, which we talk a lot about, there's also a gender equity gap. So for every dollar of equity that male founders own in their companies, women own only 47 cents. So women are just overcoming incredible hurdles to create these growing businesses and then only owning half of their success. And I'll just sort of tell you one other factor that we really see as a reason for this gender lending gap, and that's really the lending process itself. We know that women tend to get left behind in the lending process. Women business owners want to make an informed decision. Sometimes they take more time. They're highly analytical. They have questions, and they want an environment in which they're free to really ask those questions, to have a dialogue. And when those things aren't present, they can get discouraged and really disconnect from the lending process as a whole. And so with all of this in mind, we really thought very carefully about how do we build a bank that really solves these problems, right? How do we build a bank that has a very different customer experience for women across the board, but especially when it comes to the lending process. And so our lending process looks and feels very different from other banks. We are a very information-rich environment. We don't use jargon, right? There's a lot of research out there about how jargon is often used to make women feel like they don't know what they're talking about, or they can't understand something that's too complex, which of course we know is not true. So we speak in plain language. It's a very high touch experience. So you're not there. We do a really hands-on, curated, tailored underwriting process. And that means lots of interactions between our borrowers and our lenders, our closers, our portfolio managers. It's a very consultative process. And all of this is a very, very different experience than most business owners get most small business owners experience when they try to get a loan. And lastly, I also want to talk about networks, because we all know how important networks are to starting a business, to growing a business. Our team experienced the importance of networks firsthand when we formed First Women's Bank, from recruiting staff to raising capital to being connected with clients. Tapping into our networks and building new networks was absolutely critical to our ability to get to this point. And we know women are natural networkers, right? We value our networks, but too often we have limited time to really invest and create those very productive professional networks because of all of the things we're balancing in our lives. So women encounter a lot of challenges when it comes to networking, and women have traditionally really been frozen out of a lot of very important professional networks. And so we are really trying to solve for that. We are creating part of our concept of the bank, part of the structure of the bank is what we call the First Women's Business Collective, which is a way of really bringing networks together, networks that provide educational content, that provide referral sources to other women-owned businesses, that to mentors, to sort of across the board, to business advisory services, all sorts of things that we know women business owners need. We want to make them accessible. We want to make them really sort of great sources of information. And so we are putting all that together, partnering with amazing organizations that are already providing so many of these services. And that's all coming together early next year with the First Women's Business Collective.
That's amazing. Okay, so there's so much in there, ladies. I hope you're all listening and taking notes. First of all, that starting point where you said how women often start their business using their own personal capital. So I hear that all the time. Like they've got their credit cards out, they're all maxed out. They're maybe going to friends and family. And I don't hear that as much when I talk to male entrepreneurs. They're much more going down what feels like a more professional flow, for use of a better word. That point about how in the end women own 47 cents on every dollar that a man does on the equity, that's also kind of a little heart-wrenching. And then the point about being afraid of loans, I've heard this over and over again. Like, if I take a loan, I'm going to lose my business. And I think in the end, it's about learning how to get comfortable with that. Like with the right preparation, the right business plan, the right financials, your cash flow will cover that loan. And there are lots of places to get loans where the loans are very forgiving in a way. They understand that a young business is hard to predict and so on. I'm actually going to go to Pam for a quick second because Pam, you have raised a lot of money. You're in the financing business, very sophisticated. So in some ways you kind of might say, well, it's not really applicable financing the airplane versus getting your granola business off the ground. If you're Michelle Piscateri, is a little different. But they're just some basics. Like when you go into a room to think about financing, just as a woman, what are the couple of things you do to kind of prep yourself?
It's very interesting because I've been in this business more than 30 years. And for many, many years, still today, I am typically the only woman in the room. And I think at first, since that was all it was, you just sort of deal with it. You get used to it. And you have, you almost have a position of power in some ways because you are unique. And if you decide that I am the only, which makes me more unique versus I am the only, I should hide in the background, you need to turn things on its head. And from that standpoint, now fast forwarding to today, I'm also in a position, for lack of a better word, I can yell at all of my male bankers and say, where are the women? If you don't get women in this room, we're not going to have these conversations anymore, because I have a position of power and I'm at a very powerful organization. United Airlines has a lot of power in the capital markets, financial, banking world. And talking about the supplier diversity is one thing when you're talking about purchasing real life things. When you're talking about the financial services part of the business, it's very hard to say, well, I'm only going to borrow money from women-owned banks because, as we've said, I'm borrowing billions of dollars every year. That wouldn't get me very far. So having a voice and making sure that people understand I need to see more people like me and more other people, other kinds of people in the room is not just a nice to have, it's a must have. And that to me is a voice that United has and that I have to remind all of these folks I've been dealing with for 30 plus years that we haven't seen many changes. We lose women along the way. And how do we then get those women to stay in the world? And Melissa made a very good point about networking. So I have my own sort of women's network where there's a woman banker here and a woman banker there. And I've been able to connect them so that they have the support system that they need to make change in their organizations. So the networking is hugely important. But I have a voice now. I always have. I've always had a voice because I just made it that way. And people need to use their voices and take it as a position of strength, not a position to hide.
Yeah, I love that. So there's good takeaways there. So everyone listening, you might walk into that room and you are the only, and that definitely can put you in the corner, but it also makes you really memorable. I used to always think about this, and actually one of my driving forces used to always be to ask one of the first questions to just get it out there, because in some ways I'd get in my head that I'm doing this on behalf of like all womankind, which is a little crazy, but it was like my way of pushing myself when I personally felt uncomfortable. But I knew if I spoke up, it made it easier for other voices in the room, particularly in a financing room where, to your point, I've raised a lot of money through the course of my career, and often you are the only. Melissa, yeah.
Let me interrupt one thing. So Melissa also talked about jargon.
Yeah.
And Sarah, you just mentioned asking the first question. It is fascinating the number of times I've said, what does that acronym mean? And then you find out, and guess what? No one else knew what that meant either.
Yeah.
So you think you're the only one who doesn't know something? Shock. Yeah. No one knows, but everyone is afraid to ask. So to Sarah, your point, it's really easy to ask the first question if you don't know what the heck they're talking about. So
totally. And if they're blinding you with science, that means no one actually understands what's going on. In the end, something like financing should be very simple because you're talking about money, something that really matters that can make or break your business. So you should be able to really clearly articulate it to anyone without having to use a whole bunch of jargon. Melissa, as a woman or a non-binary entrepreneur, I'm going to walk in that door of First Women's Bank, or probably going to meet you online. How should I be prepared? Like, what do I need to have with me to kind of get going, to kind of hit that relationship off strongly?
Well, so first thing I would say is welcome. Excited to meet you. So we really have something for everyone at our bank. If you are a business owner and you're looking to open a bank account, establish a banking relationship with the idea that at some point down the road, when my business needs capital, I will know this bank, they will know me, and I'll be in a great position to get capital. We welcome that. And we have a really sort of cutting edge, brand new digital platform that has a full range of treasury management services that are really designed to help small businesses be more efficient, be more effective. And so as a small business, you open your accounts, you get started on our business online and mobile banking platform, and you start to work with our staff. You call and we have people picking up the phones, and we get to know you as a client and you get to know us as a bank. For those small businesses who need capital, you've come to the right place, because our entire mission is really to help provide innovative capital solutions for women and minority-owned businesses. And so we take a very different approach. We take time to understand your business. We collect lots of information from you. We make really speedy decisions, and we explain those decisions so you understand where we are, what you need, what we need from you. It's a very sort of informed process, and we have gotten so much feedback from borrowers who say, I had no idea why you needed that, or thank you for getting back to me in 10 days from the time I sent you all my documents. So it's really a very different customer experience, and it's a place where you can grow as a business. So we have an amazing business platform. We are a business bank, but also for individuals. We also offer a full sort of range of individual deposit products. So you can open your checking account, savings account. You can do all of your bill pay. You can mobile capture. You can do everything you can do on a platform, a digital platform on another bank, you can do at First Women's Bank. But the key difference really is that we are putting your deposits to work to support the women's economy. Just as Pam described at the beginning, deposits are really sort of an overlooked asset class. And most people don't really think, first of all, our deposits, our money is our economic power. And let's put that to work in a way that's consistent with our values. Why not bank at a bank where your deposits are going to help fund loans for other women, for minority business owners, for non-binary business owners? So it's a very different way of thinking about your banking relationship. But I would urge you to really sort of think really carefully about who you want to bank with and what you want your deposits and your sort of your funds to be supporting.
Yeah, I love that, because I think we as women often forget about this power of the wallet that we have. We actually own a vast amount of the wealth in any given country or nation, and yet we often don't put it to work in a way where we're really supporting our community. And I think that point about deposits, people often don't think about banks and their balance sheets, but right, you put your money in, I've got like 300 bucks, I'm going to stick it in my checking account or in my savings account. Now as a bank, you can leverage that $300 to give a loan out. And usually you can do multipliers of it, right? Because you're not just constrained to a dollar here is a dollar
Absolutely.
there. So you get the power of leverage as a bank. So even just as a starting point, everyone watching, it can be a great start just to start building that relationship. Maybe one more before we leave that, Melissa. You also do SBA loans. We had the privilege of Administrator Guzman being at our Pathways to Capital event. And that, by the way, that webinar is still available. Isabel's an amazing advocate for small businesses, but particularly women, minority, non-binary run businesses. So talk a little bit about how you work with the SBA and how would I get an SBA loan through First Women's Bank?
Absolutely. So SBA lending is a big part of our strategy because it's such a great tool for the small business economy in general, and also for women business owners for a lot of reasons. As you probably know, every SBA loan comes with a 75% government guarantee. So that gives the bank enormous flexibility in structuring loans. It takes a lot of the risk out of the loan for the bank. So banks are able to make SBA loans to small businesses that they might not be able to make if they were just conventional loans. And obviously that's the entire purpose of the program. We have a lot of experience on our team in SBA lending, and we are leaning really heavily into the SBA program. The large majority of our loans issued so far are SBA loans because we think it's really a great tool and a great resource for small businesses. One of the reasons it's such a great fit for the women's economy is because it really is a great tool for service-focused business, professional services businesses, other service-related businesses where women business owners tend to be concentrated. And SBA loan is really an ideal loan structure for those businesses. So we are really behind the SBA program in general. And we do a lot of sort of education on SBA lending, why it's a good fit, what kind of business, at what point in the sort of life cycle of your business is SBA right for you? But it really is, it's a great way for small businesses to get financing if they otherwise might not qualify for a conventional loan. And the terms are really flexible. So from a cash flow perspective, there's so many ways that it can really support a business and help a business grow.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the work they've done on working capital in particular. And I think right now in an inflationary environment, the other thing that came up as we did that call was if I'm all about granola, Michelle Piscateri is going to love me. But if I think about even a product like granola, you may not realize that the cost of almonds are going up, and maybe you need to forward purchase because you need to know that, first of all, you can get them, and second, you're going to get them at a price. So suddenly now you need money today that you're not going to be able to bring back as revenue, maybe for multiple quarters. And that's a great example where a working capital loan can really come to bear. And again, I think our women can get really afraid of like, oh, I'm taking on debt. But no, if you have a solid business plan and you can kind of forecast your revenues to a reasonable degree and you can be conservative, then you're still taking that money up front, which is paying off down the road, particularly as prices rise, because you might want to lock in your prices today. Okay, I'm going to bring us home with one of my favorite questions. So we're going to go personal here, which is, what's the one piece of advice? Think about everything you're dealing with right now, just as women in business. Maybe just a really solid piece of advice for all of the women who are listening along right now. Pam, I'll go to you first since we were just talking to Melissa.
All right, so I have so many.
Great.
Certainly one of them is say yes. Say yes to opportunities. Say yes, even if you think you don't know what you're doing, because historically many people have said yes and they had no idea what they were doing. And even if you thought you knew, things always change. So say yes and make yourself available for new opportunities always. And that's one piece of advice. I have many more that I can't think of off the top of my head, but I'll defer to Melissa. And if I think of any more,
I love that. And then I'm going to come back to you and say, if it's say yes, then is that your one thing? Because I always ask the women on stage, if we're in a real event, like, I want everyone in the audience to do one thing this week. What's the one thing you're going to ask them to do? I think it sounds like from you, it's going to be like, say some yes to something you thought you would say no to. But if there's one other piece of business, I'm going to come back to you. So Melissa.
Wait, I found it. I remembered.
Okay. Great.
It really dovetails to what we've already been talking about. Absolutely be confident enough to ask a question. Mm-hmm. Asking questions, again, we've talked about it. And if you're in any meeting, if you're any place, even if you already know the answer, to Sarah's earlier point about just to get yourself out there and to speak, ask a question and you'll get the answer, and you will find out that many other people didn't know it either. So be confident enough and positive enough to just say, hey, explain this to me.
Yeah.
So yes, that's something you can do. Yeah.
I love that. And I will give the little add on to it, which is I always ask people to ask a question early and often, because if you wait for a whole meeting and don't speak, you better be kind of curing cancer by the time you speak up, because the pressure has built. Versus if you get in there early with maybe it's just more conversational questions, it actually then when you do have something maybe bigger to ask, it's not such a mountain to climb to get your voice out there. So I love that. So thank you. Melissa, what's your best advice and what's the one action you want all the women to take right now?
So it's hard to narrow it down to one. So I might just offer two really quickly. One of them is cultivate relationships. Relationships in your professional life are so important for sort of what you're doing now, for what you want to build for the future. So really connect with people that you work with, ask questions, really form those relationships and have people get to know you, so that as you move on and as you decide to change course, you can call on this network of real authentic relationships that you have built to help you move to the next place or help you advance wherever you begin your career. And the other thing I would also say goes back to this sort of the point we were talking about women's economic power. Like, we need to realize that we have so much economic power. We know that women are controlling trillions of dollars of wealth, and that's sort of globally. But on the sort of individual scale, think about how you spend your money, where you put your money, how you invest your money. Be intentional about all of these things, because those can really, things that we've never really thought about can be used in a way to really reflect our values, and we can live a life in a way that's sort of we're being true to ourselves. So if you really do care about social justice and you care about trying to help other people, then think about sort of financially how you invest your money. What impact are you creating with that? And banking, where am I putting my money? Just sort of all of these sort of daily decisions that we make that we don't think about. Be thoughtful and intentional. And there are lots of ways to make choices that will really sort of help you live your values.
I love that. So power of the wallet. So in March, when it's International Women's Month, I'm not like a massive my team would say that I'm more of a social media user, but aside from Nextdoor, of course, which I use all the time, but I try to every single day post a female owned and operated product that I'm actually using in my life. And it's really interesting to go through 31 days and find 31 different. It really makes you very mindful of where are you spending and are you being intentional about that. And so I love that. And I think it's a way we can all lift each other up as women, as non-binary individuals. Like, how do we bring our community together for the better? So with that, thank you so much, Pam and Melissa, for joining. That was an amazing conversation. I learned so much from First Women's Bank in terms of the products that are available, how to set ourselves up well to go get access to that sort of financing. And I just love that it's built by women for women, really unique. Pam, thank you for your leadership as well and for the leadership at United. It really does take big organizations like United that are world recognized brands that have been around for, I don't know, decades and decades, maybe 100, I don't know how long United's been around, a long time, to say we're going to support organizations like First Women's Bank and of course Ladies Who Launch. With that, we have a really exciting lineup for the rest of the day. So please keep staying joined and engaged, and look forward to seeing you during the networking session at 11:30 a.m. Next up, I think we have the Increasing Your Working Capital, Exploring Loans as an Option. So with that, we'll say goodbye and thank you to our amazing keynoters for kicking us off.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah.